The passing of Ron Canoli has left a deep and quiet ache across the global Christian community, especially among those who grew up with his voice filling churches, homes, and car radios. When news broke that the legendary worship leader had gone home at the age of 81, it felt like more than the loss of a musician. It felt like the closing of a sacred chapter in modern worship history. As conversations turned toward his public farewell and the emotional moments shared by his family, many are reflecting not only on how Ron Canoli will be honored, but on what his life truly meant to millions. Ron Canoli was never just known for songs. He was known for moments. Moments where worship felt alive, joyful, and deeply reverent at the same time. His music carried a unique energy that blended celebration with humility. To many, he was not an entertainer standing on a stage. He was a worship leader standing among the people, guiding them into praise with sincerity and spiritual authority. That understanding of his calling shaped everything about how he lived, served, and is now being remembered. The announcement of his passing came on Tuesday, February 3, 2026. It was shared by his longtime music director, Bruno Miranda, who confirmed that Ron Canoli passed away peacefully in the early hours of the morning. The words used to describe his final moments were gentle and full of hope. There was grief, yes, but also assurance. Miranda described Ron Canoli as someone who was deeply intentional about one thing throughout his life. He was never an artist. He was never an entertainer. He was a worship leader. That distinction mattered deeply to him, and it continues to shape how people are mourning him today. For many Christians around the world, especially in Africa and Nigeria, Ron Canoli's music formed the soundtrack of childhood and early faith journeys. Sunday mornings often began with his powerful voice echoing through living rooms. School runs, family devotions, and church services were filled with songs like Ancient of Days, Lift Him Up, Jesus is Alive, and the deeply reverent Anointing Fall on Me. These songs were not just popular. They were formative. They helped define what praise and worship sounded like for an entire generation. As news of his death spread, the idea of a public funeral naturally came to mind for many. Not because of spectacle, but because of gratitude. People felt the need to gather, to sing, to worship, and to say thank you. A public farewell for Ron Canoli, in the hearts of many, feels like it would not be centered on silence, but on praise. Not on sorrow alone, but on celebration. That expectation reflects the kind of life he lived and the kind of worship he led. Emotional moments have already begun unfolding, especially through the voices of those closest to him. Ron Canoli is survived by his wife, Diana Canoli, a woman of grace and strength who has walked beside him through decades of ministry. Diana, who also serves as a United Nations ambassador, shared life, faith, and purpose with Ron. Together, they raised 3 sons, Samuel, Ronald Jr., and Tony, widely known to fans as the Canoli brothers. They also shared the joy of grandchildren, who now carry forward his legacy in quieter, more personal ways. Those who know the family describe them as deeply rooted in faith. This has shaped how they are processing their grief. While the pain of loss is real, there is also a strong sense of hope and peace. For a family that lived in worship, the idea of death has always been framed as a transition, not an ending. That belief has been evident in the way Ron Canoli's passing has been spoken about, not only by his family, but by those who served closely with him. Tributes from across the gospel music world have poured in, each one reflecting how deeply Ron Canoli influenced worship leaders across continents. Nigerian gospel minister Nathaniel Bassey shared a heartfelt message that resonated with many. He spoke of growing up on Ron Canoli's songs and acknowledged how those songs paved the way for his own generation of psalmists. His words carried both gratitude and continuity, a recognition that while one generation passes, the sound they birthed continues through others. Another powerful tribute came from Dunsin Oyekan, who described Ron Canoli as a general in the faith. His message honored not only the music, but the spiritual authority and consistency that Ron Canoli carried throughout his life. Calling it the end of an era, Dunsin also reminded believers that Ron Canoli was now worshiping forever in the presence he sang about so often. These tributes give insight into what a public memorial for Ron Canoli would represent. It would not simply be a gathering to mourn. It would be a convergence of generations. A moment where worship leaders, pastors, families, and believers come together to acknowledge a man whose obedience reshaped modern worship. It would be a space filled with songs he once led, now sung back to God in his honor. Ron Canoli's excellence was recognized far beyond church walls. In 1997, he received the GMA Dove Award for Praise and Worship Album of the Year for Welcome Home, an album that also topped the Billboard Contemporary Worship charts. Yet accolades never defined him. Even at the height of recognition, he consistently redirected attention away from himself and back toward God. This humility is one of the reasons his passing feels so deeply personal to so many. As discussions around a public funeral continue, many have also reflected on the emotional weight such a moment would carry for his family. Seeing thousands gather to celebrate Ron Canoli's life would be both comforting and overwhelming. For his wife and children, every song sung would carry memories. Every lyric would echo moments shared privately, away from stages and microphones. A public farewell would be a reminder that the man they loved personally was also loved globally. Yet even in that tension, there is beauty. Ron Kenoly spent his life teaching people how to worship beyond self. In that sense, even his farewell becomes an act of worship. A public memorial, when imagined by many, is not about mourning what was lost, but thanking God for what was given. It is about lifting hands, not just in grief, but in gratitude. The emotional moments surrounding his passing have also reminded many believers of the power of worship to carry people through sorrow. Ron Canoli's own songs have become a source of comfort in these days. Lyrics once sung in joy are now being sung in remembrance. The same voice that taught millions how to praise is now helping them grieve with hope. For millennials especially, this loss feels deeply personal. Many cannot remember a time in church without Ron Canoli's music. His sound shaped how worship felt, how joy was expressed, and how reverence was carried. His passing marks the end of a familiar presence, but it also highlights the lasting impact of a life fully devoted to service. As the global church reflects on his legacy, conversations about his farewell naturally continue. People want to know how and when they can gather. They want to honor him properly. They want to sing the songs one more time together. These desires come from love, respect, and gratitude, not curiosity. It is also important to recognize that Ron Canoli's life was never about the stage alone. It was about obedience. It was about consistency. It was about leading people into the presence of God without distraction. That same spirit now surrounds how his memory is being handled. There is care. There is reverence. There is patience. As of now, many have been asking about confirmed plans for a public funeral or memorial service. At this moment, no official funeral or memorial service details have been publicly released. The family and representatives have not announced specific arrangements, dates, or formats. Any information circulating beyond this should be approached with caution until officially confirmed. What is clear, however, is this. Whether public or private, Ron Canoli's farewell will reflect the life he lived. A life of worship. A life of humility. A life of impact. His legacy is already secure, not because of ceremonies, but because of transformed hearts. Ron Kenoly is remembered not just as a gospel legend, but as a servant who reshaped worship for generations. His songs continue. His influence remains. And his life stands as a reminder that true worship is not about performance, but about presence.